Okay, folks. Patricia Polacco is one of my favorite authors. I love her stories. Um, I actually got to meet her several years ago at our house in Michigan. I wasn't stalking her, so it wasn't creepy or anything like that. But this story is called The Butterfly. And you guys can see right there, there's a monarch. The story takes place in France. If you look at the cover, you should be able to figure out what time period it is. If you just look at the flag, you see right here it has a swastika on it. So the story takes place when France was occupied by Germany during World War II. Uh, and I will tell you, I do not speak French, but I do know that the French word for butterfly is papillon. And this book also reminds me of a friend of mine who had a caterpillar named the caterpillar Faith. And then when the caterpillar went through its metamorphosis, the butterfly became Grace. If you look right here, this word says Achtung Juden. That's German. That says attention Jews. To my great aunt Marcelle Solajage and her daughter, my aunt Monique Bosuga, two very courageous women, I will love as long as I live. The Butterfly, Patricia Polacco. It was unusually bright that night outside of Monique's small bedroom window in Chaussee-le-Roi, just outside of Paris. The moon was so radiant it seemed almost festive. As Monique gazed up at it, she thought that the moon must not know that her village was occupied by Nazi troops. All of France was, for that matter. There was a terrible war raging in what to Monique seemed like most of the world. But this night the moon seemed not to care. She pulled Panouf, her cat, up next to her and hugged and kissed her good night, and then drifted off to sleep. Monique didn't quite know why she woke up, but suddenly she saw a ghostly little figure sitting just next to the window on the end of her bed, a girl about her own age, and she was petting Panouf. "Who are you?" Monique whispered. The ghost child wheeled and looked with sad eyes that seemed frightened, and then spun and ran from the bedroom. The next morning at breakfast, Monique could hardly wait to talk to her mother about the ghost, but her mother seemed almost angry. It wasn't like Marcel Solajage to be angry at anyone. It was only a dream, child. Do you hear? Only a dream. Now go to school. God knows how much longer you will have the privilege of going to school with the war. Her mother's voice trailed off. Monique couldn't wait to go to school so that she could tell her best friend Denise about the ghost. Since Monique was only a child, Denise was like a sister to her. On their way home from school that afternoon, Denise asked Monique, "What did the ghost look like?" "Oh, she was dark and had very sad eyes," Monique answered. "Weren't you very, very frightened?" Denise asked. "At first, yes, but the longer I looked at her, a feeling came over me. A feeling of fear for her," Monique answered. They stopped and peered in the front window of Monsieur Marc's candy shop. He waved them in as he always did. He loved the children in the neighborhood and always had small bits of brightly wrapped candies for them in his apron pocket. As the girls entered the store, they saw that most of his jars that used to be filled with every kind of candy and confection were empty. The war. But Monsieur Marx had saved something for them. "For you, little Monique," Monsieur Marx cooed as he dropped a bright dot of sweetness into her hand. "And one for you, ma petite," he said, as a beautifully wrapped confection rolled into Denise's waiting hands. Monique and Denise unwrapped their candies and popped them into their mouths. But as they were walking away from the store, they suddenly saw tall boots coming toward them up the hill. The tall, shining boots of marching Nazi soldiers. Their heels clicked like gunshots along the cobblestone path. People froze and tried not to look at the soldiers. The girls wanted to run but knew better. They had learned to chat and laugh as if they had no cares in the world. "Are they looking at us?" Monique said breathlessly as she had gotten a distance away. Denise looked back. "No, they're still marching." And then they heard loud yelling and glass breaking, and they both wheeled and looked. To their horror, they saw Monsieur Marx being dragged from his shop by the Nazi soldiers. Schwein! Judenschwein! They heard the Nazis shout as they pushed Monsieur Marx to the ground. They watched the Nazis kick him hard in the ribs with those tall black boots. Monique covered her mouth to hold back a scream. Then a car drove up, and the Nazis threw Monsieur Marx into the back of it. Don't look for too long, Monique Denise warned. If we do, they'll come for us next. Okay, so Schwein, that's pig. Judenschwein is Jewish pig. The girls were both sobbing by the time they ran up the Rue du Bonnard to Monique's mother's house. They knew it had happened before during these years of occupation, but they had never seen it. And to Monsieur Marx. And why, maman, did they do that to Monsieur Marx? Monique choked through the sobs. The Nazis hate people like Monsieur Marx, mon chéri. It is so pointless and cruel. And her voice faded to a whisper. What do you mean, people like Monsieur Marx, Mama? Monique asked again. You know, Monique, her mother answered, Jews. But Monsieur Marx is a Frenchman, Denise said. Marcel hugged them both. The Nazis can't be here forever, my sweet children. Mother France has been here for centuries. They for a short, terrible time. And Marcel had tears in her eyes. Now I'll fix you some soothing tea. Monsieur Marx would not want either of you to worry or to be sad. Madame, a voice called from the front door. It was Pierre Vouillard, their priest from the Saint Germain des Prés, and he rushed in. Have you heard what happened to Monsieur Marx? Marcel motioned to him to come into the other room, and they closed the door, and Monique was used to her mother having hushed conversations in the living room, especially since the war. So, folks, this is a Catholic priest. Many nights passed, and Monique didn't see the little ghost again. But late one night, Monique woke with a start to see her little ghost sitting on the window seat. This time, it was holding Panouf. Monique thought, this is no dream. I can hear Panouf purring. I see you there, Monique whispered, and the little ghost sprang to her feet, but Monique stopped her from running away this time. Don't be afraid. It's all right for you to be here. The little ghost with sad eyes sat down and said nothing. What is your name, and where do you come from? Monique asked. The girl just sat there for the longest time, holding on tightly to Panouf. I once had a cat just like this one, she finally said. Her name is Panouf. What is yours? Monique sat down by her. My name is Séverine. Séverine. Where do you live? Monique whispered. I have lived many places since the war, the ghostly Séverine answered. Where do you live now? Your parents must miss you, especially in the middle of a night like this. The girl did not answer. Where do you live? Monique insisted. Here, Séverine finally said. Here? Monique said with such surprise and so loudly that it might have wakened the whole neighborhood. But I live here. Séverine motioned for Monique to follow her. They both tiptoed down the stairs and crept into the day room. There Monique saw the rug pulled back and what looked like a door in the floor. Séverine pulled up the door, and they both climbed down a very narrow set of stairs into a part of the cellar that Monique didn't even know existed. The walls were scraped clean, and there was a small table with a tiny tray and supper dishes on it. Monique could see another small room with cots, and it looked like people were sleeping on them. My mother and father and I have been here for a very long time, Séverine whispered. We are being hunted by the Nazis, you know. We are Jews, and there are many of us hiding all over France. But how have you stayed here without my mamma knowing? Oh, Madame Soliage, she knows. We aren't the only ones that she has helped. How could have this been happening in her own home, and her mother never said a word about it? Your mother made me promise that I would never come to your room again while you were there. I don't understand. It puts you in great danger to know about me. She is protecting you. Monique started to say more, but it sounded like footsteps echoing upstairs. Could Marcel have heard them? Vite, Monique, Séverine pushed her up out of the hiding room. When will I see you again? Monique whispered as the door closed over the top of her new friend. The next morning at breakfast, Monique didn't know what to say to her mother. Somehow she seemed mysterious, but she chatted to Monique cheerfully as always. Go to your garden, my sweet child, and cut some of your beautiful flowers for our table, won't you?" Monique skipped out of the kitchen doors into the garden with Panouf trotting along behind her. Panouf was playing with the petals of the flowers as Monique cut them and put them in the basket when all at once the cat crouched and made herself flat against the ground. Her eyes were ablaze. Then Monique saw why. A papillon. A butterfly fluttered down from flower to flower, and as it landed on a bright blue iris near the wall, Monique gathered Panouf into her lap. "No, ma petite, just look. See how beautiful?" They both sat quietly as they watched the butterfly together. Suddenly the air grew heavy and still, and the birds in the garden stopped singing. Panouf hid herself in the fields of Monique's apron. Monique looked over the wall and saw tall, shiny boots. Her heart leapt in her chest. Three Nazi soldiers glared at her. One reached over the wall and looked at the butterfly in his leather-covered fist. "Jolie insiste pas," he grinned at Monique and then squeezed his fist. The other tall boots laughed, and they mumbled something and walked away. Guys, I'm sorry I don't speak French. "Maman, maman, tall boots!" Monique shrieked as she ran into the house and blurted out what had just happened in the garden. "Sacre bleu, those monsters!" Her mother grumbled as she held her child as close as she could. "Maman," Monique finally sobbed, "did they do to Monsieur Marx what they did to the butterfly?" Her mother did not answer. She rocked Monique gently and stared out of the window. But Monique had her answer. She now understood the sadness in Severine's eyes. The fear was that the eyes of her neighbors and friends wherever the Nazi soldiers came close. She knew now she had to protect her friend at all costs. She had to keep the secret that lived in the basement. From that time on, Severine came to Monique's room as often as she could without waking her own parents or Monique's mother. Marcel could never know. When the girls were together, they played and dressed up and had midnight tea parties. They laughed and giggled and told each other their dreams. Monique collected things from the outside world for Severine to see and feel and touch. "What did you bring me tonight?" Severine asked softly one night. Monique reached into a small cloth bag and sprinkled rich black earth into Severine's hands. "This smells like the air outside," Monique told her. And then she handed Severine a bright flower from her garden. "This will be your sunshine, and now close your eyes." Monique slowly opened her cupped hands. Look, it was a glorious butterfly. "A papillon!" Severine whispered in wonder. Monique let the butterfly near Severine's cheek. "Let its wings flutter," Monique whispered. Severine caught her breath and smiled. "Like the kiss of an angel," Monique said softly. Tears began to fill Severine's eyes and roll down her cheeks. "I miss my home, Monique, my own bed, my own kitty, my garden. The Nazis won't be here forever. Maman says that they will lose this war." Monique reassured her. "At our home," Severine went on, "we celebrate Shabbat, the holidays, Passover, Hanukkah. My mother cooked for days. Family came from everywhere. And then it all changed. We had to leave. My parents were afraid that the Nazis would kill us. You'll be home someday, you'll see. Papa is so sick from breathing damp air. He hasn't seen sunlight for months. Maman has to cover his mouth with a pillow so that his coughing can't be heard upstairs." "I promise, Severine, someday you'll be as free as that papillon." "Let it fly now," Monique Severine says. "When it flies, it will be as if Maman, and I are flying away." And the girls took the butterfly to the open bedroom window and threw it into the night air, and then stood and watched until they could not see it any more. All of a sudden they looked up. For what reason, who knew? They saw Monsieur Landorme, the man next door, looking right at them from his window across the courtyard. Monique's heart leapt in her chest. Severine slid down from the windowsill so that Monsieur Landorme couldn't see her. The girls looked at each other in sheer terror. They knew they had to tell Marcel. They ran to her room and awoke her. She was startled to see the two of them together. They had told her about the secret meetings and Monsieur Landorme. Marcel sank to her knees in front of them. Mon Dieu," she said mournfully as she rocked with fear. "Are you angry, Madame Soliager?" Severine asked and began to cry. The girls watched as Marcel, Pierre Voillard, and Severine's parents dug holes in the cellar floor and buried everything that would look like someone had been living there. And then it was time for them all to leave. Her parents came Oh, I'm sorry, guys, I skipped a page. Are you angry, Madame Soleil? Severine asked as she began to cry. Oh, no, ma petite. Of course not. I am not angry. You are a little girl. You did not ask for this war to be kept in my cellar. You needed to play. Children need other children. Marcel smoothed her hair. But you are no longer safe here, my dear. We must leave home tonight. Marcel began to pull on her clothes. We need to get you and your family out of the country. Let me see. Pierre Vouillard will take your parents to the next refuge. You will travel with Monique and me. Yes, hurry, petites. Put on as many clothes as you can. Dress in layers. We can't carry valise, which is like a suitcase, or we will attract attention. The girls watched as Marcel, Pierre Vouillard, and Severine's parents dug holes in the cellar floor and buried everything that would look like someone had lived there. Then it was time for them all to leave. Her parents came out dressed as a nun and a priest. They both cried as they held Severine and said their goodbyes. They would next meet in a village in southern France, near the Swiss border. God be with us this night, Pierre Vouillard prayed. Ondina Yiha etenu alea. Guys, that's Hebrew, and I don't speak Hebrew either. Severine's father prayed as he cried, God be with us tonight. It seemed that Monique, Severine, and Marcel had walked for miles in the darkness and through the back alleys, avoiding street lamps, taking great care to be as quiet as they possibly could. With the first light of dawn, they had reached the countryside, and they stopped to rest under a grove of trees, close to their rendezvous with the people who would take Severine to her parents. Marcel had just given the girls some bread and cheese. When she pulled them both into a ditch, she motioned for them to be still and quiet. A patrol car full of Nazi soldiers slowly drove by on the country road. After the car passed, the three sat without speaking. Finally, another car came driving slowly down the road. It stopped by the bridge a few hundred feet away and turned its headlights on and off 3 times. It's time, my precious child, Marcel whispered as she pushed Severine out of the ditch and they ran toward the car. These people will help you and your maman and papa. At the car, Monique took something from the pouch she'd been carrying. It was Panouf. Take her, Severine, Monique whispered. Tears welled up in Severine's eyes. She folded Panouf into her sweater, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a fine gold chain on which hung a gold star of David. Remember me, Monique. We were practically home, my little one, Marcel said as she and Monique arrived at the train station in Milan. This was where they would board the train to go back to Choisy-le-Roi. But there was an unusual amount of travelers for that early time of the day. The station was crowded. Nazi soldiers were everywhere, stopping people, searching them, and barking orders. Marcel took her daughter's hand, and the other, Monique, clutched the chain. As Monique and Marcel drew closer and closer to the gate where the papers would be checked, Marcel pulled a bundle of tickets and documents from her handbag. The entire station of people had to squeeze through that tiny gate to board the train. Suddenly, the crowd behind Monique and her mother surged and pushed so hard, Monique lost Marcel's hand. Monique couldn't see her mother anymore. People pushed and shoved, and Monique lost her footing and fell. And when she did, Severine's necklace slid out of her hand onto the platform floor. Quickly, she put it into her pocket, pulled herself to her feet, slipped into the line that was pushing through the checkpoint, and was swept with them into a shabby coach car. The tall boots were shouting at everyone. What if they searched her and found the necklace? And where was her mamma? She could see through the window of her train car people standing on the platform waiting to catch a train going the opposite direction. Had her mother been pushed into that line instead of this train? She tried to see through her own tears to find her mother's face when she saw a girl alone, and she looked thin and sad, very sad, like Severine. On the girl's coat was a yellow star of David. Was it Severine? No, she could see now it wasn't Severine, but it could have been. Monique held Severine's necklace tight in her pocket. Oh, maman, maman, where are you? She cried as the train lurched away. The train rolled to a noisy stop. St. George's, the sign read. Only 2 kilometers from Choisy-le-Roi from home, Monique walked through the alleys and back streets that only hours before she, Severine, and Maman had passed. Oh, Maman, she cried as she walked. When Monique finally saw the familiar threshold of her front door, she pushed it open and climbed the stairs. She could still smell her mother's scent in the air. She was tired, so tired she threw herself across her bed and fell into a deep sleep. Then she dreamed of her mother's voice. Ma chérie, mon petit, the voice said. She dreamt a cool hand crossed her brow. It seemed so real. And when she opened her eyes, she saw that the hand was real. The voice was real. It was her maman. Oh, my sweet, brave little girl, her mother cried as they rocked in each other's arms. I just knew I would find you here. 1 week passed, two. Monique tried to imagine that Severine and her maman and papa, of course, Benuf were safe. Then the tall boots would march by her front gate, reminding him how hopeless it seemed. If only she had a message from Severine, a sign, something. And then one day Monique and Marcel were planting next year's bulbs in the garden when Marcel suddenly gasped, Regarde! Monique looked. Her mother pointed at the bleak sky above them. A butterfly fluttered down to the garden, and another, and another, and they watched as butterflies started to land on the dry stalks of faded flowers. First there were 3, then 10, then 20, and 30. Neighbors came out of their cottages and peered over the wall in wonder. It's a sign, Maman, a miracle. Severine sent them, I know it. She and her parents are safe. And Monique held up her hand, and a butterfly fluttered and landed on her finger. She took it to her cheek. Its wings fluttered. A kiss. Monique said softly. Marcel Soulage was part of the French underground and resistance organized by General Charles de Gaulle. Marcel and many other selfless citizens of France made their own homes a safe haven for Jews escaping to freedom during the terrible Nazi occupation. They did this at great peril to their own lives as well as to the lives of their families. According to my Aunt Monique, her mother, Marcel had been part of the underground resistance even before the Nazis had occupied France. Monique was totally unaware until she met Severine, but even then was not aware of the extent of her mother's involvement until the end of the war. Within 2 years of the liberation of France, Monique and Marcel received a letter. In it was a card with a drawing of a papillon inscribed on the cover. Inside it said, Je vis, I live, Severine. Next to her signature was a paw print. It was later learned that neither parent survived their attempt to escape. Severine was delivered to Switzerland and eventually made it to England, where she remained with close friends of the family for the duration of the war. Sometime later, she relocated in the new state of Israel with relatives. Monique and Severine are friends to this day. 30 years after the end of the war, Marcel contacted local Jewish agencies and asked them to unearth possessions that were buried in her basement by the families that never returned to reclaim. So I tell you guys, 2020 has been a rough year for everyone, but I think the story says that no matter how bad things are, there's always hope. So from now on, when I look at a butterfly, I will think of one named Grace, and I will think of this story and always remember the beauty of a butterfly. Thank you for listening.